After winning the main F2 race in Belgium on Sunday, Australian driver Jack Doohan came out of nowhere to fill Alpine's empty Formula 1 seat. Esteban Ocon is set to drive for Alpine next season, but the second seat is still open. This is because Fernando Alonso left the team unexpectedly to drive for Aston Martin. Alpine could use Ricciardo or the French driver Pierre Gasly next season, but Doohan could be a long-term option for the team. This and more in today's video. Aussie Jack Doohan wins F2 race in Belgium in boost to Alpine F1 hopes. Doohan, who is the son of Mick Doohan, a 5-time MotoGP champion, was 4th on the grid at Spa, but after a great start, he was in 2nd place by the first turn. The 19-year-old did an undercut on Felipe Drugovich, which let him pass the F2 championship leader and move to the front of the pack. Drugovich pushed hard in the last few minutes, but Doohan did just enough to stay ahead and win. This was Doohan's second podium of the weekend, as he also came in 2nd in Saturday's sprint race. Doohan said after the race, "Felipe had really good speed, but we were able to stay close and not really fall behind. We were both staying out longer, and our pace seemed to be pretty similar," he said. "They said that the overcut could be stronger, but I decided to do the opposite and box. I knew I got good tire temperature on the way to the grid, so I pushed hard. I didn't expect there to be so much overcut, but there was." The highly touted young driver, Theo Pourchaire, had to quit on the 3rd lap because of a mechanical problem. This gave Drugovich a 43-point lead in the F2 championship. After winning the first main race in F2, Doohan is now 4th in the standings, 84 points behind Drugovich. It was his 3rd win of the season, but the other 2 came in sprint races where the grid was turned around. The young Australian driver is connected to the Alpine Academy, just like his countryman Oscar Piastri, who won the F2 championship last year, but has had to wait his turn in F1 as Alpine's reserve driver this year. Daniel Ricciardo will be replaced at McLaren by fellow Australian Daniel Piastri. Ricciardo was effectively fired, even though he still had a year left on his contract. Alpine says that it has a contract with Piastri through 2023, but Piastri has said that this is not true. Early next week, the Formula 1 Contract Recognition Board will make a decision about the dispute. Doohan could make his F1 debut with the French team Alpine sooner than expected because he's in good shape and has ties to the team. Oscar Piastri officially joins McLaren after contract recognition board decision. The future of Oscar Piastri has been decided. The Australian star will join Lando Norris at McLaren in 2023. The decision was made by the FIA's contract recognition board after a meeting on Monday, when it was said that the rising star would replace Daniel Ricciardo at McLaren. F1's silly season went into high gear. It all started when Fernando Alonso, a 2-time world champion, surprised Alpine by saying he would be driving for Aston Martin in 2023 after Sebastian Vettel left. Alpine then said that Piastri would replace Alonso, but the 21-year-old from Melbourne turned down the offer, which was a brave move for someone who had never driven an F1. The French team said it might sue to get back the millions of dollars it spent this season on training on Piastri. Auto Hebdo, a French magazine, said that Piastri had valid contracts with both Alpine and McLaren through 2023. However, the CRB said that McLaren had the upper hand. As soon as the board's decision was made public, McLaren made the signing of Piastri official. Ricciardo's time at McLaren was cut short by a year when the team decided to sign Piastri instead, leaving the happy West Australian out in the cold. People say that the door is open at Alpine for Alonso's seat, which Piastri would have filled. In 2023, Alfa Romeo, Haas, and Williams all have open seats, and it's likely that all of them would want to sign a driver like Ricciardo. The leader of the Haas team, Gunther Steiner, is said to have talked to Ricciardo about the break in the season. Kevin Magnussen from Denmark has a multi-year contract with Haas. Mick Schumacher, a young talent, has a contract that ends at the end of 2022. Why Oscar Piastri isn't the villain in McLaren Daniel Ricciardo saga. In the story of McLaren, Alpine, and Daniel Ricciardo, Oscar Piastri is not the bad guy. Friday night, the FIA's Contract Recognition Board announced that Piastri's contract to drive for McLaren in 2023 has been approved. Piastri, who is 21 years old, will be Australia's next Formula 1 driver. Fans of Formula 1 F1 aren't happy about the messy contract situation, but Piastri isn't to blame. By the mid-season break, Alpine has not signed Piastri for 2023, but because Alpine didn't use their backup driver and hedged their bets with Alonso, Piastri had every right to look for other options since Alpine wouldn't promise him a seat for next year. Piastri and his manager, Mark Webber, had been trying for a long time to get him on a competitive team so that he wouldn't be left out in the cold if Alonso stayed at Alpine. McLaren has also been criticized for how it treated Ricciardo after it became clear that he publicly said he was going to stay with the team even though he had already signed Piastri without telling him. The FIA finally decided that Piastri and McLaren had reached a deal on July 5th, the day after the British Grand Prix. 9 days later, Ricciardo posted a message on Instagram saying that he wasn't going anywhere. His words show how out of the loop he was and how badly he was treated. He didn't know he'd been fired yet, but on Saturday morning, McLaren said that the Aussie had known where he was sitting the whole time. Ricciardo was expected to get a payout of between $14 million and $24 million, but he would give it all up in a heartbeat if it meant he could drive for a competitive team next year. Because of how the whole thing has gone, it's easy and unfair to paint the current Formula 2 champion as the bad guy, but Piastri is not a bad person. Moving on, F1 fans furious at disgusting Daniel Ricciardo treatment on pre-race show broadcast. Fans of Daniel Ricciardo have had a rough year, and they were furious at what they saw as a cheap shot at the Australian F1 driver at the Dutch Grand Prix. Max Verstappen won the race, which Ricciardo finished 17th in. However, it was the F1 TV show before the race that upset fans of the 33-year-old driver. During short talks about how different drivers were doing, the broadcast showed a two-word graphic that got the Ricciardo army going. It said, "struggling again," which made fans of the West Australian driver angry. They were also upset with how his exit from McLaren was handled by the team. Other drivers' biographies were much more basic, so the way Ricciardo was written was seen as disgusting and toxic. At Zandvoort, Ricciardo finished 10 spots behind his teammate Lando Norris. On the team radio after the race, he said, "I know it's been pretty hard lately, but we'll keep going." The McLaren team replied, "Don't worry, Daniel, we're still working hard. It will happen." Another thing seen from the trackside made people talk. Ricciardo was seen talking to Red Bull driver Sergio Perez before the race, and it seemed like he brought up the idea of taking a year off from F1 and coming back in 2024. The veteran will be replaced at McLaren by Aussie rookie Oscar Piastri next year, and he hasn't said what he plans to do next. Finally, Daniel Ricciardo told Oscar Piastri there's no hard feelings about McLaren deal. Daniel Ricciardo called Oscar Piastri, an Australian who will replace him at McLaren next year, to let him know that he doesn't feel bad about how things have gone this year. After a long legal battle, Alpine and McLaren have agreed that Piastri will join the team in 2023. This was confirmed this week. Ricciardo and McLaren came to an agreement last month to end his 3-year contract 1 year early. Ricciardo said that he didn't want Piastri to feel bad about what happened. Ricciardo said after Sunday's Dutch Grand Prix, "I've spoken to Oscar and just made sure that there's no bad feelings there. I think it's made him feel better. And I think the last thing he wanted was for a few of the only Australians who have ever played this sport to have weird tension with each other. So I'm glad we did that." Mark Webber, the only recent Australian F1 driver, is also connected to the story because he is Piastri's manager. Before Sunday's Dutch Grand Prix, Webber went to talk to Ricciardo, who took his place at Red Bull in 2014. It's still not clear what Ricciardo will do next. Pierre Gasly of AlphaTauri is likely to be signed by Alpine for next season, leaving him to choose between Haas and Williams. Ricciardo said before this weekend's race that he wouldn't mind taking a year off from F1. Unfortunately, guys, that's all the time we have for today. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Till next time, cheers.